most, if not all to some extent, people who especially openly identify as asexual or by extension aromantic have to be a bit politicized, I guess. Hello lovely humans, welcome to the space on the internet. Today I'm going to be reacting to Jubilee, the YouTube channel's video entitled "Do All Asexuals Think the Same?" We're just gonna do that. Let's go. I guess I'll be going through it. It's not the whole video. If you want to see the whole video, I'll put it up here. And otherwise I'm just going to listen to the questions, give like my answer, I guess, and then I'll comment on what I think of or the relevance of the participants' answers.
There's been times where I tried dating people because everyone is doing it, but I was always upfront like, hey, I'm asexual, this might not be your thing, you know? And then they're like, no, I totally understand. 3 months later, they're having a tantrum because you won't kiss them.
Okay, right away. Do all asexuals think the same? No. And I'm sure, like, that's the entire point of the Spectrum series, is to point out that not all people of a certain demographic will think the same when it comes to most things. So I think this is a really good venue to have asexual discourse, especially coming from asexual people who can provide accurate experiences.
Even though I'm asexual, I still experience attraction.
I think I'd probably put myself in slightly agree. Not because I experience sexual attraction necessarily, but because I think of like my existence as like a bit of a universe. Just like attraction to me feels akin to gravity, so obviously I'm attracted to various different things and people in different ways and to different extents. None of them are sexual and none of them are romantic. But I still think that there's matters to do with sexuality and just life in general that involve different types of attraction, and I do think I have the capacity for that and do experience that. That would be my answer.
Like, there have been times in my life where I've been like, is this attraction, or like, is something happening here? But for the most part, I have just been like, no.
Asexuality, it really is a large spectrum. Under the spectrum, I fall under demisexual, which basically means that I need a strong emotional bond with someone before I could feel any type of sexual attraction.
So this person is describing that they are demisexual. So happy that they have like all sorts of different asexuals on this panel.
I can look at someone and say, this person is really attractive, but you know, I don't have sexual attraction or like I want to date this person.
There's also like different forms of attraction. I can be attracted to aesthetics, but I don't really have like a romantic attraction.
Yes, Reggie. I think that is accurate of myself as well. Plus we both have like bluish hair, so that's pretty cool.
I find sex repulsive.
No, I don't think so. In fact, I don't think sex is repulsive at all. I feel like that is in part irrelevant to someone such as myself's identity as asexual because it's about attraction rather than sex itself, the entity. So, I don't know, I would say disagree. Just disagree.
I'm in like the gray spectrum of it, of like asexuality. So like there are days where I want, like there are days I feel it. There are like times where I do. There's times I don't.
Yes, Ivan, not necessarily relevant, but like I'm loving Ivan's vibe, and the awkward hand gestures, and I just think I want to be friends with Ivan.
Some people communicate through sex, like.
So Chanel is saying that some people communicate through sex, and I think that that's a cool conversation topic to introduce here, because everybody's going to view the purpose of sexual activities differently, regardless of their sexuality, but also in like relation to their sexuality. and as a form of communication, I think is really cool, because I just think acknowledging different kinds of communication is just a cool thing.
And though it may not be for me, it just depends on who the person is.
Yes, okay, so that's what they say, is that depends on the person.
I'm not repulsed by other people doing it. Like, anyone can do what they want, obviously. It's not something I can see myself participating in.
I think that Michaela's idea here is probably representative of a lot of asexual people, I would guess, in that, like, typically we don't care what people be doing. It's purely about ourselves. It's not, asexuality isn't a political view whatsoever, in the same way no other sexuality is a political view. It can accompany political views and activism, but otherwise is like, has nothing to do with how we see other people doing things, or how people in general doing things on a grand scheme of the world.
Asexuality is purely about the attraction and not about the action. You know, you can not experience that attraction and still be like, oh, this feels nice. To me, like, sex is like an activity that you do in the same way that you can like hug someone or shake their hand. Like, for me, it doesn't have like some other level, or like the level that society wants to tell you that is inherent to sex. Like, I'm just like, no, it's an activity that you do with one or more other people. Like, that's all it is.
Exactly.
So they seem to all agree on that point. Sarah posed, and I do as well, because that's like exactly how I view sex, I think. Just as like, just indiscriminately as an activity. In the same way you can enjoy doing any other given activity, you can enjoy doing sexual things. I feel like for the majority of these questions, it's going to be a matter of separating that, like, asexuality isn't this, and it isn't this, and it isn't this. Because in reality, like, asexuality is very simple. It's a sexual orientation describing feeling little to no sexual attraction. That is it. But the whole reason there's discourse around this kind of thing, I think for the most part, is because people like to take that definition and then extrapolate from it and make assumptions that are usually incorrect. And then as asexual people, we tend to spend a lot of time just like disproving myth after myth after myth after myth after myth. Because really it is so simple.
I feel invisible to the LGBTQ plus community.
I would say slightly disagree, I think. I think that's where I would go. I think that's probably in large part because not only am I asexual, I'm also aromantic, which kind of the same thing, but I'm also just genderqueer, gender fluid. I have a lot of queer things about me that influence my queer experience and make it resemble that of, let's say, bisexual, pansexual, lesbian, gay, or trans people. So I think it'd be harder to exclude me or erase me from the LGBTQ plus community because I do have experiences that are or are similar to those who are part of the community but not necessarily asexual or aromantic. Also, what I do here is tell people about asexuality, and in my case, how it relates to the greater queer community as well. So I don't feel invisible, but I think that asexuality is less known, and that's also part of the reason why I'm here, is because I think that there's value in there being more information in the world about it, and so people in the asexual community don't feel invisible to the rest of the queer or LGBTQ plus community.
The LGBT community of itself is very sexualized. Like, at Pride, it's very sexual. I think it's hard for them to include the sexuality that is absence of that.
Yeah, okay. So Michaela's commenting on like the alienation from queer events specifically because seemingly asexuality is so contradictory to a lot of other sexual identity labels that are part of the queer community.
I've heard so many people say that asexuals don't get as oppressed as other people in the LGBT community, but that's not all that LGBT community is. It's not just whether you get oppressed or kicked out by your family. We're still experiencing things differently from the rest of the world, and it feels better to have a community of people.
Yes, 100% agree. That's the kind of thing I wish I could have said as nicely as they said it. I entirely agree.
For me, this question is a little bit personal because the closest thing was for me was my auntie, because my auntie is lesbian. And it comes to relation with family, like everyone accepts my auntie, but when it comes to me, it's just like, oh, you don't exist. You haven't tried it yet. It makes me feel a little bit empty.
Like, as you say, like, pride is really sexualized, and like being sex positive and like encouraging people to have as much sex as they want also means that sometimes they don't want any.
As someone who identifies as gay, I really did want to hear everything out that they were saying because I completely agree with everything that they just said. I do see more things on social media. We are becoming a little bit more open-minded about it, but I don't want to give too much credit because I 100% agree that we need a lot of work in the community.
The increased visibility is great, it's really good, but it also is driven by ace people and aspecs.
Okay, so what I would say to the points that everybody is bringing up is that what I'm noticing is that most, if not all to some extent, people who especially openly identify as asexual or by extension aromantic have to be a bit politicized, I guess. They have to understand the politics, identity politics surrounding the asexual spectrum. So all of these people are kind of experts on asexuality and sexual identity in some ways because they've had to learn it in order to just like exist as an asexual person without constant scrutiny, which, I don't know, their knowledge may not even dispel such scrutiny, but it's just a thing that I notice is that it's impossible to identify as asexual, or at least very difficult to identify as asexual, without fully understanding every aspect of asexuality as it relates to the queer community. So we tend to become very well versed in queer issues in general, and especially as it relates to the ace community, if that makes any sense.
So I guess where I find community, it's definitely like the internet, because like I definitely remember watching like this show called like BoJack Horseman, and
Yes, asexual representation is so important, and I think these people are doing an amazing job at explaining why.
I am still exploring my sexuality.
Am I still exploring my sexuality? I'd say slightly agree, because I don't think I'll ever be finished exploring my sexual identity in all ways. That's not to say that I'm not very firm in the labels that I do use. But yeah, I'm just exploring my identity in a very idle way, and that doesn't in any way undermine my identity as asexual already. Yeah, I don't know. I'm an evolving human being, and my sexuality will adapt according to my living circumstances. And that's just how I view the nature of sexuality in general. So yeah, I'm asexual, I'm aromantic, I'm a relationship anarchist, I'm gender fluid, and that's just who I am. And I'll do different things and maybe decide that those words aren't entirely accurate, but I'm pretty sure they are accurate, you know? That's where I'm at. And even if I were wrong, which is impossible, you can't really be wrong about how you feel. It's just a lack of having it fully realized. But even if I were quote unquote wrong, it doesn't matter to me because I know I'm a queer being, that I do queer things, that I am a queer blob of existence, and nothing is gonna change that, I don't think. Let's hear what these people have to say. Ooh, it's very like split. This is interesting. I don't know, good question. And I like this question because it's not like I mentioned before, like what asexuality isn't, and then them having to explain what asexuality is and isn't. It's just a question that is relevant to asexuals because of their sexual identity, not for any defined reason other than that they're asexual and they exist and they have a sexuality or don't have a sexuality depending on how you look at it. But I like that it isn't something derived of a misunderstanding of what asexuality is.
I used to identify as demi, and then I went to ace, like gray ace. So like I'm still at like, is this correctly what I identify as.
I am still unsure of myself. So I'm trying to be okay with not really knowing some things about myself.
And I think that's one of the misconceptions about the ace community is that people will approach you and will think that you're not experienced, or you don't know what you're looking for, or you're too young and you'll figure it out. And that's very wrong.
There are times where I'm like, was that attraction? What was that? But like, it doesn't matter what it was. Like, it's not going to change my behavior.
Yes, I definitely agree with Sarah's point there, in that like it doesn't matter what it was. It doesn't change that I'm ace, I guess. Because I think a big misconception around identity labels in general is that they're limiting, in that because you've assigned this word to yourself, you're not allowed to experience things that fall outside of the definition of that word. And there's no controlling that. Like, you either experience a thing or you don't. And you might experience a thing that seemingly contradicts an identity label that you use, but that isn't really a thing. There's no such thing as like inherently contradicting, for example, the label asexual, because you can experience things and that's just an experience. And you can be ace and you're just ace. And there's not as much of a very strict connection between those two things. Yes, the fact that you call yourself ace is derived from the fact that you have certain experiences or don't have certain experiences, but you're going to experience something regardless of what you call yourself. And a label like asexuality is just meant to help communicate to others your experiences and to better understand yourself and to find community. So like, it doesn't really matter. You can be asexual and be and do anything.
I feel like at this point, I already know what I want, and I'm so over like other people judging me for it, you know? I'm just gonna stay here in my little bubble. I'm comfortable being right here, you know?
Yes, Chanel. I'm super vibing with Chanel too. I'm vibing with all of these people, but like that particular point, I think I'm chill in my identity. I'm gonna be in my little bubble. I've gotten to the point where there's not much anyone else could do that would affect how I think of myself with regard to my asexual identity. And I'd rather just chill without the kind of people who try to make me question that sort of thing.
And only like in the last couple months was I was like, oh, I finally went back to asexual. It's a broad label and I can be comfortable being under that umbrella.
Yes, if you're comfy under our umbrella, then you are meant to be there. And I am actually super pleased with the cast of this video. I mean, I skipped a few questions, but for the most part, I think the questions were valuable and were conducive to good conversation starters about asexuality, especially for non-asexual audiences, which, in considering Jubilee's fan base, like, the vast majority of them are probably not asexual. So I think that this was a really well done video. I appreciate this video, and I would recommend you watch it, or recommend it to people who you want to better understand asexuality. So that's our video. I hope you had as much fun as I had just talking about a video. You can share your thoughts, whether you related, if you've seen it before, because it's not a new video. If this video had any effect on you when you first watched it, or if you haven't watched it, I don't know, then watch it, I guess. Or don't. But yeah, let me know your beautiful thoughts, asexual or not. Farewell, lovely humans. We'll see you next time on the space in the internet.